Hey everyone, it's Pastor Andy. Thank you so much for tuning in to the Antioch Conversation podcast today. Today we have a fantastic show for you. It is going to be a blessing. You just might laugh. I think you're also going to cry. As you listen for this. That Jenny Clawson, she makes a comment. All right, listen for it. She says, "Lean into the hard. Lean into the hard. Listen, if you're going through a hard time, maybe you just came out of a hard time. Listen, this podcast will be a blessing and encouragement for you today. Thanks for tuning in and enjoy this conversation."
Welcome to the Antioch Audio Podcast. Today, we're sharing an intentional conversation to help you follow Christ in a life-changing way. Let's jump in.
Hey, everybody, and welcome to the podcast. We have a fantastic show today, speaking with some good friends of mine, John Mark and Jenny Clawson. Say hello, my friends.
Hey there.
Hey, Andy, how are you?
I'm good. How are y'all?
We're pretty good.
Good. So we are recording this on a Sunday night, kind of a late night recording. But you guys are late night people, am I correct?
Sometimes.
Well,
Depends on which kid needs us.
Right. I'm a late night owl, but
In all honesty, I would love to be in bed by 7:30, but I'm making an exception here.
Oh wow, we're already way past that. So, all right. So, hey, thank y'all for taking time to share with our church today, kind of some things that God has been doing in y'all's life, and just so people kind of get an understanding. Our family, we met you guys about 3 years ago. Is that correct?
That's right. When we
Yeah.
very first moved back from China. That's right.
yeah.
Yeah. So we could say
Probably been that long.
you guys are part of that original launch team, basically.
That's right. That's right.
Yeah. I remember your family coming to even our small group that we were having, and at the very beginning, and just getting to know you guys, and just kind of knowing right from the bat that you're a family that is not afraid to follow the Lord, even when it's difficult, and even when it's sometimes hard. And you guys have a fascinating story, and yeah, our church needs to hear it. And so wanted to give you guys an opportunity to share what God's doing in your life. So why don't you start by just talking about your family? How many kids do you have? Where'd you guys grow up, and what do you do?
We have 4 kids now. What's funny is we had a friend ask the other day, they're like, we hadn't seen him in a while. They're like, "How many kids do you have now?" And
I just laughed.
we laughed. Anyway, we have
It's bad
2
when people start losing count, right?
Yeah. So we have 2 biological kids, and we have 2 adopted kids, and
Awesome.
the 2 adopted kids are both from China.
Awesome.
And then we're currently fostering one child.
Yep. Yeah, we're only a month in so far with that.
Yes, it's pretty new.
So did y'all grow up in this area, and kind of where did y'all meet, and how long you been married?
Well, I'm actually a Georgetown native, believe it or not. And Jenny,
I was born in Austin, but I spent most of my childhood in Plano, Texas.
Yeah.
And then I moved back to Austin for college, which is when we met.
Yeah.
We met, I was about 23. I guess we met at a church we were both going to. And we were doing a television ministry. It was an apologetics TV show on a cable access television station. And we
Wow.
sort of
yeah, we just became really good friends doing that.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, you get to know each other really well because we were making videos together every week, and yeah, so that's how we first met.
That was back in, we got married in 2005. So we've been married for 15 years now.
That's right.
All right. Awesome. And so, kind of met in doing videos together, and John Mark, videography has just been something that's been following you around, right?
It has, yeah. Ever since I started off doing computer stuff, but then ever since I switched over to video stuff, it's just been nonstop. But it's one of those things that, like, now that I'm doing it, I just know that like this was meant to be.
Yeah.
I think
Yeah.
God just designed me to do this kind of stuff, and I mean, I've helped with, um, all every church I've been with. I think I've been a part of the media team during the years, so, but I love it. I love doing it.
Yeah. Well, you definitely are talented in that area and have a God given gift. Are you for those that don't may not know, you do the live stream for Antioch,
Yeah.
and so for all the people that are able to watch at home, whether they're sick or just not able to attend for whatever reason, you're kind of the hinge that makes that possible. And the joke amongst our staff is that if John Mark can't be there, we might as well not do live stream because it never we can never get it to work. Um, so,
Well,
hey,
I'm
kudos
happy
to
to.
you.
Yeah. Well,
Yeah.
it's fun. I like doing
And
it.
so, and another quick claim to fame, videography as an occupation for you too, right?
Yes. Yes. Yeah. I've been currently with a TV show called The Day Tripper. It's a Emmy award winning show. It's been on PBS for, well, we're just starting our 12th season now, and yeah, I've been with them for 3 years, and yeah, I'm actually hitting the road later this week. We get to
Oh,
travel around Texas and get to do all kinds of fun stuff. So it's
sweet.
it's definitely not your typical 9 to 5 job. I really like it.
Yeah. Very cool. So tell us, like somewhere in y'all's story, y'all ended up in China for a period of time. So what, what was it? Just you woke up one morning and said, "Hey, let's go to China." Like, tell us, kind of how that happened.
Um, it was almost like that actually. No, I mean, there must have been things building up to it that we just didn't see until it all hit us. But my mother moved to China after going on a mission trip to Beijing, I guess 2 years before we decided to move there. And I was looking for a job closer to my house, oddly enough. And in my searching, I went to a job fair, and when I was there was a school called International Schools of China, and
Hmm.
um, I just felt like God was telling me that we were going to China. And when I came home that night, I talked to John Mark about it, and he actually felt the same pull on his heart, which was
Hmm.
odd because he's definitely a Texas boy and never ever wanted to leave
Yeah.
Texas. So, um,
Georgetown boy too at
That's
that.
right. I
yeah.
know.
So we didn't really know why we were going there, but we had already come to the Lord with the yes on the table, and so that
Hmm.
was the direction that He put us toward, and so since we had already said yes, that's what we went for.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you went to China without work and without knowing exactly why?
Well, so since I had met this lady with International Schools of China, we decided that I was already teaching at the time, and
Okay.
I applied for a job teaching at their school. They have 7 schools in China and in the UAE, and so I applied to teach. I think it was a kindergarten class, and originally I got hired, but that company, they're a Christian company, and they hire Christians to go and basically, be Christians in China.
Hmm.
Um,
Yeah.
and so when after I was hired, we went to the pre-field orientation, and I'm skipping way ahead in the story, but once we went to that pre-field orientation, they said we're actually not comfortable with hiring y'all.
Hmm.
And
Wow.
so they and this starts a pattern in our life actually of what seems like a closed door, but then when we go to the Lord, he comes back and
Hmm.
says, no, keep going. And
Yeah.
we basically have to say, okay, if we quit right now, everybody will think it's okay because it looks like a
Yeah.
closed door. But we know that God is saying, no, keep walking. I've got a different way or a different direction for you. And so we
Yeah.
actually got the go ahead from that company to raise funds and just be sent out basically as without um, income from the company. And so that's what we ended up doing is
Yeah.
John Mark worked in their marketing department, and I did not teach, actually. I went as a stay-at-home mom with our 2 children. So,
Hmm.
yeah, the Lord really blessed that obedience, and we went 6 months later.
Yeah, that's awesome. It reminds me of there's a verse that Paul writes to one of the churches, and he says, "There's been a wide door for effective service," which sounds great, right? Like if you know there's an opportunity there
Mm,
Yeah.
to do ministry and it's going to be effective, but then he says this: "There's a wide door for effective service, and there are many adversaries." Um, so so for Paul, it was like, yes, the door is open, but it's not just, I'll walk through and sit down on the couch and it's going to be easy peasy.
right.
There's definitely going to be challenges, and it sounds very similar to what you guys have experienced as you have followed the Lord. So you leave America, you move to China, a family of 4, you come back with a family of 6. Like, tell, like, how does
Yeah,
how does
like
that happen?
I think we had been there only 6 months when so we knew um, a lot of other people there that had adopted kids from China, and
Yeah,
so that was like all around us. And so we definitely didn't go there with the intent of like, yeah, we're gonna go to China and probably adopt some kids. Like
no.
that was never on our mind actually.
wow, wow,
Um, but we we became friends with people on Facebook that that were there or just in other parts of China that we had gone to orientation with, just kind of staying in contact. Well, they would post about these orphans in China, and
yeah,
one day we ran across this one child, and God was just kind of like getting our attention with it. I think like we yeah, Jenny saw it first, and then she sent it to me. I was actually at work that day.
Yeah. And I said, "Hey, can we pray about adopting this child?" Like that's just how I am. I'm very like, let's just do this.
yeah,
And once again, even though it hadn't really been on our hearts previously, God just, steered us in the direction that we needed to go. And again, since our yes had already been on the table, that was the yes that He had in store for us.
Yeah, yeah, and it's like when you're in that situation, like it's like at least for me, it was like, okay, how how could I say no to a
yeah,
child that needs a home that we know we could provide, and
yeah,
I'm not saying like everyone should adopt, but it's I think we should find more reasons to say yes than to say no. And
mm,
I'm not saying it's always a battle inside me, but I think it's good to find the yeses and doing what's good,
yeah,
rather than like we can always find excuses.
Yeah, there's
Trust
always
me.
reasons not to.
yeah. Yeah, I could probably think of 12 dozen reasons
Yeah,
for you guys, and not
Mhm.
even just for myself, but you guys were obedient, and so you find yourself in this adoption process. And
yeah.
what's that like? I mean, you're on the other side of the world. Um, I mean, were there challenges? Were there obstacles? Is it the easiest thing you've ever done?
No. um, it was very difficult. And you would think that being in the country where our son was would have been easier, but it actually was more difficult because that's not really the process that typically happens. Typically, it's an American couple that wants to adopt internationally, and so everything that they need is right there. For example, we had to get documents authenticated, and those kinds of things happen within your city. And
Yeah,
so there were lots and lots of trips to the embassy. There were lots
Mhm.
of
Late night phone calls back to the United
yes.
States and coordinating things like with
wow,
yeah
Our
couriers and
yeah, and my mother and father-in-law did
yeah
a lot of things for us,
yeah,
but the cool thing about it was that we got to meet our son
yeah
before we adopted him, which isn't. typically what happens with international adoption.
No, that is not typical at all.
Right. And
Interesting.
he, I guess I can tell this story. So before we adopted Justin, that's our son, we call him Ray Ray. Ray Ray is his Chinese name. It's RUI, and it means prosperity or auspiciousness. And so we kept that as his name. Plus, he was 4 years old, and yeah, he was already attached to that name.
Yeah.
But we actually we were not complete with his adoption, and we actually moved back to the United States before his adoption was complete, thinking that it would be complete that summer, and we were still
Mhm.
technically under employment with the company that we were with, and so nothing was really changing. We just thought we would go back to China, finish the adoption, and come back. Well, when we talked to our caseworker, she said, no, actually, the adoption probably won't be complete until January. And that was in June. And so we
Hmm.
had to make a decision. We had to decide if we were going to start all over or stop the adoption process or move back to China. And so we moved back to China. So we moved back
Wow.
to the United States, and God said, nope,
Oh,
you have
wow.
one more year in China. So we moved back to
Yeah,
China with our other two children.
yeah, and
The
thankfully,
bags were barely unpacked.
yeah,
We were barely
I
unpacked.
know exactly.
Wow. Wow. I don't think I ever knew that part of the story.
Yeah,
That's incredible.
we had to decide, I think at that point, if we were all in for this little boy, and we were. There was
Yeah.
no question.
Yeah.
That
We were like,
That's
oh,
awesome.
okay, well, I
That's
guess
awesome.
we're going back.
that was a difficult thing. It's hard to like completely change your mindset about like because you're like thinking
Yeah.
like, okay, well we're starting life over again in the United States, right? Well, nope.
Nope, going back.
Let's
Yeah. Yeah. One
it,
more year.
yeah.
Wow. That's part of Justin's story. Where does joy come in the picture?
So the amazing thing about going back, and at the time I thought it was probably the worst thing that could have happened, was that we flipped our other two children, our biological children, we flipped their lives upside down twice. But
Yeah.
what it ended up being the best thing that happened to our family, because once we went back to China, I was out on the balcony putting laundry out one day, and I just felt like God gripped my heart and told me that we were going to adopt a little girl with Down
Wow.
syndrome. And so, against the advice of our caseworker, we told her that we wanted to adopt a little girl with Down syndrome. And at the time, you could adopt two children at once from China, and you didn't have to wait to do that. You could do it at the same time.
Yeah.
And so we we got paperwork for one little girl. We said yes, and she was already being adopted by somebody else. And so we got paperwork for another little girl, and it was Joy May, who
Mhm.
is the darling of our family. She's the sweetest little girl, and she's such a joy to be around.
Yeah.
Um, but if we had waited, like our caseworker had told us to wait, we would not have been able to adopt her, because the law changed that the next year, and you had to wait a whole another year in
Yeah.
order to adopt another child. That's how the law changed. So God just knew what he was doing. He needed us back in China, and he
Yeah.
needed to speak to me on that balcony,
Yeah.
um,
Yeah.
and Joy definitely needed to be in our family, because
Yeah.
Justin is also equally amazing, but just the way that God worked all of that out was a
Mhm.
miracle.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, let's talk to the person here, maybe the person listening, the person sitting in America, and their plans haven't shaped up like they thought or like they expected. Um, what you're kind of looking back, recounting the faithfulness of God. There's probably someone they feel like they're on the balcony right now, or they were sent back to America. Now they've got to turn around, and the next year has been flipped upside down. Like what encouragement do you give them to get through something like that?
I think lean into the hard. Just
Mm,
cry, mourn before God, like tell him why you're mad that things aren't going your way, and then keep going. I mean, what else are you
Mm.
going to do? Are you going to turn back? I don't think that that's really your heart. I don't think
Yeah.
that's, and that wasn't our heart. So, when I know I've said it so many times now, but when you come to the table with your yes, that
Yeah.
it really does mean that God can do whatever he wants with your life.
Yeah,
Mm.
and I think you recently shared this in the sermon, but God, and we can attest to this. I think God uses the hard parts in our life typically more to make us into what He wants
Mhm.
and to do the things He wants through us, and that's not easy. It's not something I like. We don't like that, but
Yeah.
just remembering that though in those moments can really help you just lean into God, like she said, because it's tempting to just you know throw up your arms and be like, forget it, forget the whole thing. This is too much. But
Yeah.
yeah, it's best just to lean into God during those times.
So after the sermon today, I was really, it really spoke to me today, talking about that you're never going to be ready, but God
Mm.
prepares you, um, for what he's going to use you for. But if you're waiting around to be ready, you're never going to be. And you're
Yeah.
just always going to be saying, well, God used me, but not that way.
Yeah.
But I was just telling the kids on the way home, the word patience in the Bible has also been translated long suffering.
Mm.
And um, I really do believe that, the longer the Lord asks us to suffer without a break, the more we're becoming like Jesus. I mean,
Yeah.
God is
Yeah.
love, and love is patient, or love is long suffering. And if we've never experienced that, then we cannot know that part of our Lord, and that part of him is just so sweet, and so it almost makes you feel like you're part of a special club when you're like, wow, I suffered long with my Lord the way
Mm.
that he suffered long for me. And
Man.
yeah, you just don't want to miss that.
Mhm.
Yeah. What an incredible, powerful testimony, because we do kind of live in a society that wants the quick fix and the easy out.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Get me out of trouble, and I'm guilty of it too. We pray for God's
Oh
Of
yeah.
protection,
course.
and we pray for safety and security, and there's nothing wrong with that. But man, the words you just shared are powerful, and I may just take a moment to pause and read from Romans 5. I was just felt the Lord leading me to this as you were sitting there sharing. And Paul says, "We boast in our afflictions." Now, I don't know how many people like boast in their afflictions, but it's not a bad thing. It's not a prideful boast. It's a sharing that, hey, this has done a work in my life. That's what y'all's story is. Your story is a story of enduring and suffering through the affliction, the hard times.
Mm,
But Paul says we boast in those afflictions because we know that what it produces, and he says it produces endurance. Endurance produces character, and character produces hope.
mm,
And so the road to a greater hope in the Lord is paved on hardship.
mm,
um, it's not the easy way. It's not paved on when the burden is light. The way that we hope more in the Lord is through those times of suffering. So, man, thank you for giving us just a tangible, practical way to realize that, and what it looks like in life. Um, but the story, I mean, we're what, halfway through the story? Like, there's still you come back to America. Did you go back to China for another year after that? Um, bring us from that point 3 years ago to where you guys are at today with this new foster child.
Well, yeah, we did. So we stayed another year in China, and it did take it did take the full year. At first, we were thinking like, oh well, maybe it'll only be 6 months, but no, it did take the full year. But yeah, we came back and moved into our old house, and we were searching for churches.
Yep. That's when
um,
we found Antioch,
and that's when we found Antioch.
which has been amazing.
Yeah.
Sweet.
So we knew when we came back that we wanted to do something to continue to advocate for children without homes, children from hard places, and
Yes.
we did a few things here and there.
Hmm.
Eventually, we moved into a bigger house and decided that our family had more love to give, and
Yes, we did.
so we started pursuing foster care.
Yeah. So we attended some trainings on foster care and just finding out more information on it. But at the time, and this was like, oh, I guess maybe 2 years ago.
Mhm.
At the time, we were like, I don't know if we're called to foster care. We both
Mm.
kind of left that kind of kind of sensing that we weren't, and we were we felt we were redirected to adopt again, but this time adopting an older child and
From China.
from China again, and we were pursuing a girl. Um, she had also had spina bifida,
Yes,
like
like
our
Justin.
son, but she could not walk.
She's in a wheelchair.
Yeah, she's in a wheelchair.
Yeah.
So we started to this, and so we were at Antioch at the time, and we were fundraising, and things were moving along, and it really looked like God was opening every door, especially
Yeah,
financially. I mean, He
Yeah.
was just
yeah. There was a huge outpour of
yes,
support, and it was really encouraging. But we were also kind of in a race against the clock to adopt this child because the she was going to turn 14 in the summer, and we had to adopt her before she turned 14 because the law in China um, says that you cannot adopt children. It doesn't allow children to be adopted once they reach age 14.
right.
Right.
Um, so,
Well, what happened was we got all the way to the end,
yeah,
and this was in June. We got all the way to the end of the process where your application for adoption goes before the governing authorities of that province, and they came back and they said no.
Hmm.
And the reason why was because of my past. I don't really need to go into detail, but I have some things in my past from when I was a teenager, really early 20s, maybe, um,
Yeah.
that are very, very different because I got saved around that time and
Yeah.
completely, my life completely changed. Um, but unfortunately, they had changed one little rule about what you could have um, in your past at all. And that wasn't a rule when we adopted previously. And so
Hmm.
they came back and they said no. It was pretty devastating. We
yeah,
honestly wanted to give up because I especially was very, very attached to this girl emotionally.
yeah, yeah. I mean, we were already planning on like making modifications to our house to accommodate her and
Right.
buying a specific vehicle to carry her in the wheelchair. And I mean, yeah, we were like, I mean, we had her room ready and everything. We were really attached to her, but
Mhm.
yeah, that was hard news.
Yeah.
It was
So
really discouraging, really discouraging.
Yeah.
so
And
again, we could
yeah.
have nobody would have blamed us.
The
Everybody would have said that was a
right.
closed
You
door. And
yeah.
we I guess it was what like almost 6 months later, we really felt like God was saying, no, continue on with foster care.
Yeah.
And
Hmm.
so we started those classes with a placing agency.
Hmm.
And I'm just going to fast forward here a little bit because there's a theme. And guess what? They said no.
What?
And
And
it
so
was,
that time,
So we got
you
the end of that process. Yeah.
yeah, and so then you said, "Okay, we're done. We've got our family of
yep.
6. We live happily ever after."
And no
Yeah.
one would have blamed us, Andy.
Yeah.
And no one would have blamed you. Yeah.
But we did
Not the
it.
Clawsons. The Clawsons are and the we
What's
laugh, but
lazy is the word. No.
I think this is a good time to just pause and point out, the value of persistence. And I'm thinking about the story in the Bible about the lady. Someone you might have to help me out on this one.
Right.
Because I don't have the Bible memorized, but the lady goes to her neighbor and starts
Mm,
knocking on the door for bread,
right.
and he tells her no, no, but then he finally says, because of your persistence,
Mm,
I'll give you what you're asking for,
Yeah.
yep.
um, and so there is a definite biblical example to be persistent in our prayers, and another word for persistence is the word faithfulness. It's just being faithful to what God's called us to. When you know that God has called you to something, it's like there's no mountain that you wouldn't climb um, to get to to get to the peak, to get to the top.
Yeah.
And I mean, that's y'all's story. You keep getting knocked down, and you keep getting right back up.
I think especially when it comes to fighting for people, like, um, it's one thing to be called to an issue, but it's a whole nother thing to be called to a specific person. And you just don't stop fighting. You just don't. I mean,
Yeah,
that's because that's a person. That's a person made in God's image who he loves and died to save. And
so good.
I think that that's really what has kept me going because I honestly did not want to. I honestly
Yeah.
wanted to close myself off and say, no, that hurt pretty bad. I'm not
Yeah.
gonna, I'm not gonna do that anymore, Lord, because obviously, Lord, you don't care about my heart. That's what it felt like. Um,
Mm,
but um, I think he really showed me, like, I suffered for you. Um, I do care about your heart, but I want you to be like me more. And sorry, I'm getting a little choked up.
yeah.
um, I again, I just, sometimes people will say, well, if it's gonna work out, then it's gonna work out. And to that, I say, I'm just gonna fight for it.
Yeah.
I'm not gonna sit back and just say, well, if it works out, it works out, because that's not what God did for me. He fought for
Mm,
me. He didn't just
that's so
say,
good.
well, if she comes to me, she comes to me.
Mm.
He pursued me my whole life until I finally gave up and gave in. So
And so, what does that um, put the ribbon on top for us through that foster care? No, um, how did you guys get to where you're at today?
Yeah. So we got the no, and
that was
we
super confusing.
we 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 were kind of like in a holding pattern for a little bit, trying to figure out like, well, can we go to another agency? Like, is this allowed? Like, we found out like, yes, you can. Eventually, we found out, um, and
Mm.
so that's what we did. We went to another agency, and we went through it without a problem at all. And it took, it still took like a few more months to gather everything because each agency does things a little differently. But um, we made it through. We got certified or licensed, and the very next day, they call us and say, "Hey, we have a 2-year-old that needs a home,"
Mhm.
and we're
Wow.
like, "And he's coming tonight," and we're like, "Okay, well, here we
There
go."
you go. There you go.
Yeah.
Uh, so you finally get to see the little man that you've been fighting for.
Yep.
Uh, you get to pick him up, and so that's kind of where you're at today, right?
That's right.
Are still taking care of one foster child,
Yeah,
um, and I'm assuming there's really no timeline for that. This is kind of an ongoing life now for you guys
that's right.
uh, to have these opportunities to foster kids in our area that find themselves in situations where they need a provider.
Yeah, and it's definitely like it's like you would think like, okay, well, they've been through all this hard stuff. They've adopted 2 kids and moved back and forth from China,
Yeah,
left homes, left, all their possessions and stuff.
yeah,
But Man, I'll tell you, like foster care is it's tough. Like even after everything we've gone through, it's like
Mm.
yet again one of those new challenges. But it's
You kind of got to put on the mind that you're going to fight for this family. You're fighting for this kid to sort of make it in your home, but you're actually fighting for them to return to their original home. And
Yeah,
so it's one of those things where it's like, with adoption, all you're doing is helping them become a part of your family, and with foster care, you're helping them to become a part of their own family.
yeah,
It's
yeah,
kind of this strange, like all of our effort will go back to somebody else. It won't
yeah,
come back to us,
yeah.
kind of a thing. So
yeah,
you kind of, it's been a shift in thinking that
Hmm.
I got to let that go, and trust that, because I don't really see what's happening. I don't see what's happening with the bio family at all,
yeah,
and it's kind of just sitting and living in a mystery every day,
Yeah.
and you
yeah.
kind of just walk in faith with that. But so that's, don't
That,
have a lot of wisdom for that because
but
we're currently in it.
but but
That's
it's
where you're at right
stretching
now.
in many ways, I guess you could
Yes.
say, which is a
Yeah.
good thing.
So, what about the family who's out there right now listening? How does a family know if they're being called to foster or adopt?
Well, I'd say number one, um, the Bible already says care for the orphan. So you know that if it's something that's in your heart and that you care about, that God is with you and God is
Mm.
behind you because that's His heart. You
Yeah,
know, the Bible says that if we delight ourselves in Him, that He'll give us the desires of our heart.
yeah,
So we know if we have that desire and we have that leaning and the care and the compassion, and we think about it, it's probably God calling you.
yeah,
I'm just
Yeah,
gonna say pretty definitively, if we're thinking about it and leaning that way, then that's probably God,
yeah,
because that's God's heart, and the
yeah.
yeah.
Bible says it is. So we can trust that. We just jump into things, Andy. I don't know. We just do it.
Hey, that's you alluded to the message from earlier today, and just I think that's a case in point. Sometimes you just have to do things. You just have to take action, and you can't wait for the perfect timing. You can't wait for the perfect day. You can't wait for the perfect opportunity because you're going to get the door slammed in your face, and you're going to hear
Yeah.
no. But you don't give up, and you keep going, and eventually you're gonna get what you're looking for, what you're pursuing, or you're going to be rerouted in a different direction. I was talking with a guy just this past week, and he began to share how he and his wife had adopted a young boy, and it was amazing to me. He was sharing his story, and he said, there's this boy that was coming to church, and I prayed, my wife and I prayed that God would provide for him a home. And he said, as soon as we prayed that prayer, he said, you kind of felt yourself like almost wanting to eat your words. Like, oh, wait, God, I wasn't talking about me. I was talking about us. Um, but it was because that was the desire. That was the prayer point. And so I do think a family can look at what are the things that burden you, what are the things that you are praying about, and you probably have a good sign right there of
Mm,
what God is leading you to do and what
Yeah,
action step you need to take. Even if you don't know what that action step is, you just jump out there and you just start.
yeah.
yeah,
Yeah,
And you don't have to be perfectly suited for it. We
yeah,
always laugh how when my husband and I were going through the marital counseling and we were talking about, like, well, how many kids do you want and where do we see ourselves in 5 years and all those things that you talk about, we both said to each other, we don't want any children. We don't
yep,
like children. We don't.
oh wow,
John Mark
yeah,
came from a big family of
yeah,
five children, and he didn't he
yeah. I
didn't
was
want
like, I'm
that.
never having a big family.
And I just didn't see myself as a kid person,
Yeah,
yeah,
and um, we were not perfectly suited in a sense, but God knew what He was doing.
yeah,
So you don't have to be the perfect family and the perfect person and all of the
oh no,
objections that you think you can think of, like well, how is this going to affect my biological kids? And all of those things that you can
Mhm.
think of. Like, I'm just telling you right now, yes, it's going to do all those things. I wish I could say, like, well, don't worry about it. But guess what? It's going to do all those things. Like, just
Yeah.
go for it. I mean, and it's going to be okay. Things are actually going to be better than
Yeah.
they are now
Yeah.
in the long run.
Right.
This is a long game. It's a marathon, not a sprint.
It is.
That's so good. What a good point. Keep the end goal in mind. And often sometimes the end goal is, hey, let's just get through today.
Yes.
Let's
Yep.
just get through today. You don't have to
Yeah,
take
one
it in chunks as of years and lifetimes, because that's when life just kind of passes you by. But just kind of take it in those small increments, those small daily chunks. So, man, thank you guys so much for sharing your story. Is there anything else you want to add or share, or just offer up to people listening today?
I would just say be open, like, don't don't just be open to whatever God is showing you. And, like, I think one of the objections that a lot of people, especially guys, I think have is like, I could never love a child that isn't mine. And you know what? Like, it's when you get that child, like, God just does something in you, and you do, like, and you grow even closer over time. And I can't imagine our family without Joy
Mm.
and
Mm,
Justin, and even our new foster child. I feel like, I feel so I felt connected to him on the first day,
Yeah,
and
in an odd way.
yeah,
Yeah.
in an odd way. So, God just
yeah,
does it.
yeah,
Yeah, just let God do it.
Yeah,
I think that's the moral of everything. Like, just let
mm,
him do it.
yeah.
You're gonna be
That's
okay.
yeah.
yeah, so good. Hey, thank you guys for sharing your story. Thanks for being an inspiration to my family, to our church family, and to everyone else who's listening today. We're praying for you guys. We are standing right here beside you and with you, and keep up the good work. Love y'all.
Thank you, Andy.
Thank you, Andy.